So, you're planning to teach The Wild Robot by Peter Brown. Where do you start? This video will show you how I approach this book before we actually start reading it. How do we generate interest? What prior knowledge do we need to gain or activate? My name is Bethany from Enliven, helping you to raise thoughtful, engaged readers. Let's dive in. If you've ever handed your child a brilliant book like The Wild Robot, only for them to read the first page, put it down, and say, "I'm bored," the issue usually isn't the book. It's that we skipped pre-reading. Step 1 is activating prior knowledge. Before introducing this book, try to engage your reader in a discussion about one of the key themes in the book: nature versus technology. In a classroom, this could be a structured lesson, but if you're a parent doing this at home, it can be a dinner time conversation or something you talk about in the car. Ask a question like, if a robot were stuck on a deserted island, what would its biggest problems be? They might think of things like rusting from the water and the weather, nowhere to charge, lack of Wi-Fi, electricity, animal attacks, and so on. You could then turn it around and say, what if instead of a robot, it were you or another person on the island? What would you do to survive? And maybe try to guide that conversation to point out that the ideas they came up with are similar to what animals would do to survive in the wilderness. Try to connect it to something they're knowledgeable about and or passionate about. For example, my daughter's class this year did a whole unit about beavers. She knows practically every available fact about beavers, so if I asked her how a beaver survives in the wilderness, she could talk to me about building shelters, finding food, avoiding predators, and so on. These conversations are not just about setting the scene. When we pre-activate concepts like this, readers are front-loaded with some of the thematic concepts. This means a less daunting mental load when they're trying to do the other cognitive tasks of decoding language and comprehending material. Teaching the brain to match up these context clues with the things they already know about is a foundational comprehension skill. Step 2 is exploring the physical book. Take some time with the physical text. Before you dive in, take some time to look at the book with your reader. Do a study of the cover. Notice the colors, the lines, the shapes, and so on in the style of Peter Brown's illustration. The book contains illustrations throughout, so it'll be helpful to have them noticing details now, particularly when they're looking at the even more engaging full-color image on the book cover. Next, discuss the title. What is a wild robot anyway? I think this would be a fun place to do a quick mini lesson about oxymoron. An oxymoron is a figure of speech that pairs two contradictory words right next to each other to create a striking or thought-provoking effect. Deafening silence, or jumbo shrimp. How can a robot, which is by definition man-made technology, be wild? It's a fun idea to think about, but will also end up being one of the key themes in the text. Read the description on the back of the book. My edition actually starts with a question, can a robot survive in the wilderness? Which is a great way to harken back to that previous conversation, especially if it happened in a different lesson or on another day. Having discussed the concept of a wild robot and how that could be related to survival, here's a quick art activity you could try. Draw a line down the center of a piece of paper, and on the left side, ask the child to draw a quick self-portrait. Emphasize that it should represent how they normally look, perhaps even how they look today, down to the clothing that they're wearing. Have them write their name in big letters above the drawing. Then, on the other side of the page, ask them to draw another self-portrait, but this time, make themselves wild. Let their imaginations fly with that, but if they need a little more coaching to get started, have them think about what they would look like if they had been surviving for a long time in the wilderness. They could even add background decorations showing that they're in the wild. Then, over top of that drawing, add white letters that say the wild name. So on the one side is regular Jessie, and on the other side is the wild Jessie. The letters could be cut out and glued on, or you could paint them or write with acrylic marker. The idea is you're making one half of the page resemble the book cover, but putting your reader in the book, so to speak. The goal is to get them excited about exploring further, but also to continue to think about the way that wildness transforms us. Step 3 is front-loading vocabulary, and I consider this an optional step because it depends on a few factors. What are your goals for reading this book? If you're a parent approaching this as an enrichment read, you may not want this to feel too classroomy, and if your reader is on the older or more advanced side of the target audience, the vocab lesson may not be necessary. However, I want to include it because if you are indeed teaching a classroom full of diverse learners, there's a good chance at least some of them will benefit from this. And if you're in a homeschooling situation where you're actively working on literacy curriculum goals, then vocab building is helpful for gaining fluency. I'm about to suggest that you read the first chapter of the novel together, so before you do, pause for vocabulary. Identify a couple of words from the first chapter and take a few moments to explicitly teach them, their pronunciation, definition, and using them in a sentence. I trust you know the level of your readers better than I do, but here are some words I would consider front-loading. Hurricane, chaos, cargo, crates, shattered, torso. By introducing less familiar terminology first, it offsets that mental load needed to deal with them when doing the complicated cognitive task of reading. When they encounter these terms in the natural context, it will help seat that vocabulary into long-term memory, thus learning. Next, read the first chapter together. Whether your plan is to use this as a read aloud or assign it individually, I think it's beneficial to read the first chapter together. Read it aloud while the reader follows along. With one kid, this can be accomplished sitting side by side, but with a group, you can either have each child with their own copy of the book, or photocopy the first few pages, or project them onto a screen. The first chapter is only 3 pages long, so it shouldn't be too challenging to get it in front of each reader. Reading together helps to set the tone. In the first chapter, the 2 main things I would point out to readers are the first-person narrator and the imagery. Now, reader, what I haven't mentioned is the tightly packed inside each crate was a brand new robot. Who is this I that's speaking to us? For these grade levels, it's fine to think of this voice as the author, and it's useful to have the reminder that this text is constructed from somebody's imagination. But if you have an especially strong reader, start to consider the idea that a first-person point of view does not always represent the author. In fiction, even an unnamed narrator is usually referred to simply as the narrator. In any case, we want to notice this narrator-author voice as it will continue to speak to us directly at some key points in the novel. For imagery, talk about how the description of the storm and the shipwreck paints a picture in our minds. The opening scene is almost cinematic. How does the description impact how we feel? Is there anything that makes us feel curious about what's going on here or what's going to happen next? Readers might be wondering what the robots are for or whether there were any people on this ship. There don't seem to be, so why not? And why is that last crate so important? It's the final image in the chapter and what sticks in our minds. And that's it. So if you follow this plan to 1. Activate prior knowledge, 2. Explore the physical book, 3. Possibly front-load key vocabulary, and 4. Read the first chapter together, your reader should be set to dive in. And don't forget the activity idea to make a wild version of yourself and turn it into a book cover. In my next videos, I'm going to go over how to teach some of the key themes and literary concepts that emerge as we read this book. Like and subscribe to support my channel and make sure you don't miss my future videos. At Enliven Lit, I want to help you raise thoughtful and engaged readers. Until next time, happy reading.